They say the walls of an asylum never forget. If you listen closely enough, you can still hear the screams. I used to work the night shift at a psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of town. It wasn't the kind of place you'd see on brochures or websites. No glossy paint, no bright windows, no smiling staff photos. The hospital was decades old, with long, dimly lit corridors that always smelled faintly of bleach and mildew. I had convinced myself that the unsettling feeling I got walking those halls was just the weight of the job, till one particular night proved me wrong. The unit I worked in housed some of the most unstable patients, those who needed constant monitoring. Most of the time they were sedated, and the nights passed with little more than occasional murmurs, footsteps echoing, or the distant clanging of pipes. I carried a flashlight, though the overhead lights were always on. Somehow, even under fluorescent lighting, the place felt shrouded in shadow. Around 2 a.m., I was stationed at the nurse's desk, finishing some paperwork, when I heard something unusual, a slow, steady tapping like fingernails against glass. It was faint, but rhythmic. I froze, trying to place the sound. At first, I thought it was just one of the patients restless in their room, maybe tapping the bars of their window. But then it grew louder. It was coming from the hallway behind me. When I turned, the hall was empty, stretching down into pale light. The tapping continued closer now. It sounded deliberate, like someone mimicking footsteps but with their fingers. I called out softly, thinking maybe one of the patients had slipped out, though it was nearly impossible with the locked doors. No answer. I decided to check the nearest rooms, just in case. Room after room, each patient was asleep, some snoring, others shifting in their beds. No one was awake. Yet the tapping didn't stop. It seemed to follow me. By the time I reached the end of the hall, my nerves were shot. I stopped walking, and so did the sound. For a few seconds, there was silence so deep I could hear the hum of the lights above me. Then, from just around the corner, I heard it again, tap, tap-like. Someone waiting for me to come closer. Against my better judgment, I rounded the corner, shining my flashlight. The beam fell on an empty hallway, lined with doors that hadn't been opened in years. This was the closed wing, no longer in use. Patients weren't supposed to be here, and neither was I. And that's when I saw her. At the far end of the corridor stood a woman in a nurse's uniform, an old-fashioned one, crisp white with a paper cap, the kind they hadn't worn in decades. She wasn't moving, just standing, her head slightly tilted as if she were studying me. My flashlight flickered, and for the briefest second, thought I saw her face, hollow eyes, and a mouth open far too wide as though caught mid-scream. The light steadied again, and she was gone. I backed away, my whole body shaking, and when I turned, the tapping started again, this time from the ceiling above me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran back to the station and stayed there, refusing to move until my shift ended. The next morning, I asked one of the older nurses about the closed wing. She looked at me, strangely, and said it had been shut down after a nurse was attacked and killed by a patient decades ago. They said her body was found at the end of that hallway, tapping against the wall in her final moments, trying to get someone's attention. Ever since that night, I've refused to work alone on the night shift. Some say the mind plays tricks in places like that. But sometimes I swear I still hear her tapping. When I was in college, I signed up for an internship at a mental health facility. It wasn't the kind of hospital you'd want to spend time in. Old, underfunded. With yellowed walls and that lingering smell of antiseptic that never seemed to fade, the staff acted professional. But there was something about the place that felt wrong. The patients rarely smiled, and when they did, it never reached their eyes. Most of my tasks were mundane, filing paperwork, fetching supplies, delivering charts, but every so often, I had to walk through the patient wards. The fluorescent lights flickered, buzzing faintly overhead, and the echo of footsteps carried unnaturally far down the narrow halls. There was one part of the hospital everyone avoided, the East Wing. It had been sealed off years before. Rumor among the interns was that a patient had been forgotten there when the wing was closed, literally locked in one of the rooms, abandoned in the dark. By the time anyone discovered it, weeks had passed. No one ever said exactly what had been found, only that it was gruesome, and that the administration covered it up. At first, I laughed it off as a scary story told to new recruits. But the longer I worked there, the less funny it seemed. For one thing, the staff never joked about it. They never mentioned the East Wing at all. If you brought it up, their expressions hardened, and they changed the subject. One evening, I was tasked with dropping off patient files to the records office, which was right near the old wing. I hadn't realized it until I turned down the wrong corridor and saw the heavy metal door at the end. The paint was peeling, and a rusted chain was looped around the handles, though the lock looked new. The overhead light above the door flickered and buzzed like it was struggling to stay alive. I told myself to keep walking. But then I heard it. At first, I thought it was my imagination. A faint scratching sound coming from behind the door, like fingernails dragging slowly across wood. I froze, straining to listen. The scratching grew louder, rhythmic, deliberate. My mouth went dry. I tried to convince myself it was rats. Old hospitals were full of them. But then came something that made my blood run cold. A voice. It was hoarse, weak, almost like a whisper through sandpaper. "Don't forget me." The words were muffled by the thick door, but I heard them clearly. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. The voice repeated the phrase again, this time faster, more desperate. "Don't forget me, don't forget me." I turned and bolted down the hall, the echo of my footsteps chasing me until I was back in the main ward. Later that night, I couldn't shake it. I told one of the senior nurses what I'd heard. Her face drained of color, and for a moment, I thought she might actually answer me. Instead, she just muttered, "Stay away from that door. For your own good." Then she walked away, leaving me standing there with more questions than answers. For days afterward, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'd catch myself staring down that corridor every time I'd passed it. And sometimes, I swear this is true, I thought I could hear faint whispers even from a distance, though no one else reacted. One night, I was staying late to finish paperwork in an empty office. The hospital had gone eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, pressing against your ears. Suddenly, the lights flickered once, twice, then dimmed. That's when I heard it again. At first, it was faint, like someone whispering from another room. Then it grew louder, closer, until it sounded like someone was standing directly behind me. "Don't forget me." I spun around, but the office was empty. My chair creaked as if someone had just been leaning on it. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I was overtired, that stress and exhaustion were making me hear things. But deep down, I knew the truth. That voice wasn't in my head. The following week, I made the mistake of telling another intern what had happened. He went pale and nodded like he already knew. He told me that years ago, a patient had been left in the East Wing when it was closed for renovations. Staff forgot about him. When they finally opened the door weeks later, he was still there, but barely alive, malnourished, broken, and out of his mind from being left alone in the dark. They moved him to another facility, but he didn't last long. He died whispering the same words over and over, "Don't forget me." The intern swore that people still heard him sometimes, scratching at the doors, begging to be remembered. I wanted to believe it was just a story, but something inside me knew better. I quit the internship a week later, telling everyone it was because of the stress. But the truth is, I couldn't walk those halls anymore, not with that voice echoing in the back of my head. And even now, years later, when I'm alone in a dark room, sometimes I swear I can still hear it, whispered softly right behind my ear. "Don't forget me." My uncle used to work as a night security guard at a psychiatric research facility. It wasn't exactly a hospital, not in the traditional sense. It was something stranger, a hybrid between treatment center and experimental lab. Patients weren't just given therapy or medication. They were tested, observed, pushed. The building itself looked like a relic from another era. It had been built in the 1950s, with long, sterile hallways that smelled faintly of ammonia and metal. At night, when the staff went home and only a skeleton crew remained, the silence was overwhelming. My uncle often said the place never felt empty, even when it was. He told me this story only once, years after he'd quit. Even then, his hands trembled as he spoke. It was around 3 a.m. on one of his shifts when he noticed something unusual. The basement level, a part of the facility that was strictly off-limits to security, had a door slightly ajar. Normally, it was locked with keycard access. At night, the lock light blinked red, malfunctioning. He thought maybe one of the doctors had forgotten to close it, and being thorough, he went down to check. The basement was colder than the rest of the building. His flashlight beam cut through the dark, revealing rusted pipes overhead and walls streaked with condensation. The deeper he went, the more oppressive the air became. It felt heavy, like breathing underwater. That's when he noticed the handprints. They smeared across the walls, dark stains stretching down the corridor, some small like a child's, others long and thin. They weren't fresh, but they looked deliberate, dragged fingers leaving trails, as though someone had been pulled against their will. The trail led him to a wide steel door at the end of the hallway. From behind it came a sound that froze him in place. Shuffling, uneven footsteps pacing back and forth. He called out, his voice echoing unnaturally in the narrow hall. "Hello, anyone in there?" The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in, broken only by the hum of the failing fluorescent light above him. He almost turned back, but some part of him, duty, maybe curiosity, pushed him to unlock the door. Inside was a large chamber. The air was damp, stale, carrying a copper temps like old blood. In the center of the room stood a single metal chair, its leather restraints dangling, cracked and worn. Along the walls were mirrors, or what had once been mirrors. They were shattered inward, jagged pieces littering the floor, reflecting fragments of his flashlight beam. But what chilled him most was the realization. They weren't mirrors at all. They were observation windows, one-way glass. Something inside the room had broken them, reaching out toward the other side. He took one cautious step inside. The sound of his boots echoed too loudly, bouncing back at him. The shuffling resumed, this time behind him. Spinning around, he swept the flashlight across the room. That's when he saw it. Crouched in the farthest corner, almost blending with the shadows, was a figure. Almost translucent, stretched taut. Almost translucent, stretched taut over sharp bones. Its limbs were long, too long, bent at odd angles as it swayed in place. When the beam of light touched it, its head snapped up. The eyes were the worst part. Wide, unblinking, filled with a wild recognition. It looked at him as if it knew him, as if it remembered something he didn't. The figure opened its mouth. No words came out. Only a wet, guttural rasp, like the sound of someone trying to breathe through water. Its lips trembled, as if forming words it no longer remembered how to say. My uncle said his body screamed at him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He was frozen, caught in those eyes. Finally, the figure lurched forward, not walking, jerking like a puppet with tangled strings. It moved fast, too fast, stopping just short of the circle of light cast by his flashlight. It crouched at the edge, swaying, testing the boundary. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then slowly, it reached out a hand. The fingers were long, skeletal, twitching unnaturally. It stopped an inch from the light, as if the brightness itself was a barrier it couldn't cross. My uncle's breath came in ragged gasps. He managed to step backward, then another, until he was at the door. The figure didn't follow. It just stayed crouched, swaying, watching him leave. He slammed the door shut, the sound reverberating through the hallway. He didn't stop running until he was back upstairs, his lungs burning. When he reported what he'd seen, his supervisor stared at him coldly and told him flat out, "There's nothing in the basement. You didn't see anything." So the more he insisted, the harsher the warnings became. Finally, one of the older guards pulled him aside and whispered, "Don't ask questions, don't go back down there. Some experiments were never supposed to exist." He quit the job a week later, unable to sleep, haunted by the memory of those eyes. He told me that the worst part wasn't the figure itself. It was the look it gave him, the flicker of humanity still trapped inside, as if it remembered being human, but had been twisted into something else, something that wasn't supposed to exist. Even years later, my uncle has nightmares about that basement. In the dreams, he's back in the observation room, the broken mirrors glinting all around. Only this time, the figure doesn't stay in the corner. It steps into the light. It remembers his name.